going through the book of Hebrews, and we'll be in chapter 7. I'm going to back up a couple of verses in chapter 6. So we're going to go through chapter 7 this morning, and we come into contact with this very unusual individual. We first meet him in Genesis. Melchizedek is introduced to us in Genesis chapter 14 and in Psalm 110. That's all the information that we have about him. And so in Genesis, in chapter 14, it's just a handful of verses. That's all there is. In Psalm 110, it's one verse. And so we really don't have a lot of information. And it seems just, to me, it's mind-boggling and exciting that we get all this information concerning Melchizedek in the New Testament. And so how is that possible? Well, it's the Holy Spirit revealing to the author of the book of Hebrews a bunch of information that we haven't had until now. And so back in chapter 14, it's a time when Abraham rescues his nephew Lot and family and a whole bunch of other people. You remember that Lot decided, hey, I'm going to go and I'm going to live in Sodom and Gomorrah. So he's living in Sodom. And so a bunch of kings, 5 of them, from the north came down and attacked and then took the people, took a bunch of stuff, and were hightailing it out after that. And so Abraham grabs 300 plus, just a handful, like 318 or something like that, of his own guys. Now, his servants, these are just servants. They're shepherds. They're working out in the field. They're herdsmen. They're not warriors. They go after these kings, and they take back all the people and all the stuff, and they bring it back. And on the way back, before they ever get to Sodom, Abraham and his guys, with all the rescued people, the hostages, and they come in contact with Melchizedek. He's a king and a priest. You don't do that. You're either a king or a priest. But no, he's the king of Salem, which is the king of peace, and he is the priest of the Most High God. Now, this is really interesting because during Abraham's time, there were no priests. Not amongst the Hebrews, not amongst the Jews. And so it's Abraham and his relationship with God and all the promises that God had given to him. It's just really an amazing study to go through Abraham's life. But as he comes to this king, Melchizedek, he gives him a tithe of all the stuff that he got. And then Melchizedek blesses Abraham. So we're going to get some information. And today we're going to find out that the lesser offers tithes, a tenth of everything that he got, offers tithes to the greater, and the greater blesses or bestows a blessing upon the lesser. Up until this moment, it's just Abraham. He's the greatest. He's the greatest thing that there ever was. And still, through the lineage of Abraham, it's always Father Abraham, and he is just like just this amazing character. And now in the book of Hebrews, we have the author explaining that Jesus is greater than, more predominant than, greater than, and then he lists a whole bunch of stuff, whether it's Moses or angels or the prophets or the high priest. And so we're going to get more of the information about Jesus being a greater high priest than any of the high priests that the Jewish people were aware of. And you were only a high priest if you were a descendant of Aaron, the brother of Moses. If you were a Levite, nobody else could. You couldn't put in an application, hey, I'd like to be high priest. Well, where are you from? What's your lineage? Well, I'm from some other place. No. Wouldn't happen. It could only happen if you were a Levite. So backing up in chapter 6, let's just take a look and kind of getting this introduction into what's happening there. This hope that we have, our hope is Jesus. And anytime we have hope in Jesus, it's a done deal. It's a sure thing. This hope that we have is an anchor of the soul. It keeps you steady. It keeps you from drifting. And that's what was happening. The Hebrews were drifting back into their old way of worshiping God, back into the Levitical system, back into the sacrificial system. And that's why the author of Hebrews is saying, whoa, 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 you have more than you need. You have everything. When you have Jesus, you have everything. You don't need anything else. You don't need a sacrifice. He is a sacrifice once and for all. You don't need a high priest. He is our high priest. He's a greater high priest. So when we have this hope, we have an anchor of the soul, both sure and steadfast, and which enters the presence behind the veil, where the former has entered for us, even Jesus, having become a high priest forever, according to the order of Melchizedek. Before, as I said, the order was of Aaron. The order was of the tribe of Levi. And so all of a sudden, we're talking about a new kind of a high priest, a new order. Where does this come from? How did that happen? Well, it came before Aaron. And it came after. Before Aaron. I'm going to introduce some of you to a new word. The word is Christophany. 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 What is a Christophany? It's an appearance in the Old Testament of Jesus before the birth of Jesus in Bethlehem. An appearance of Jesus in the Old Testament before the birth that was witnessed by the shepherds, you'll remember. Jesus lying in a manger, the angels singing, all the stuff that's going. Before that ever happened, Jesus appears a few different times. Let me show you one. It's in Daniel chapter 2, verse 25. So we've got King Nebuchadnezzar, and he has 3 Hebrew young men. They're outstanding young men. They've been given Babylonian names. Their Babylonian name is Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. You know the story. And so the king has a beautiful statue of himself made. And then he's got the king's band. And so the command is, whenever the king's band begins to play, you're supposed to bow down and worship the statue. Worship me. Well, these are young Hebrew men. It ain't going to happen. And so when the band played and they didn't bow down, King Nebuchadnezzar goes berserk, and he decides to throw them in the fiery furnace. He's so outraged, so indignant, that he tells his guys, heat this thing up 7 times its normal, temperature. And so the guys that are throwing Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego into the fiery furnace, they not only singe their eyebrows, they become crispy critters. And so King Nebuchadnezzar is looking down there. Here's Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. They're not even singed. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, and listen to this. Look, he answered, I see 4 men loose, walking in the midst of the fire, and they are not hurt. And the form of the 4th is like the Son of God. Whoa. What is that? Christophany. Scholars reinforce one another that 4th person that looks like the Son of God is indeed the Son of God. Christophany. There's another one It's found in Genesis chapter 16, verses 7 through 10. Hagar, the handmaiden, the servant of Sarah, with her son, they run away. Just can't take it any longer. And so she's about to die out in the wilderness. In verse 9 of that text, 7 through 10, the angel of the Lord said to her, "Return to your mistress and submit yourself unto her." Then the angel of the Lord said to her, "I will multiply your descendants exceedingly, so that they shall not be counted for multitude." An angel, Gabriel, or anybody else, any other angel, they cannot make that kind of a promise. They cannot cause her to be the great patriarch of a multitude of people, Arabs. That was a similar promise that God had made to who? Abraham. Only God can make a promise like that. Christophany. And so now we have this character, Melchizedek. I'll be honest with you. Not everybody agrees that Melchizedek is a Christophany. They will all agree that Melchizedek is a type of Christ, a type of Jesus. And I'll show you why I've just kind of been pushed over to the edge to say, no, this is indeed a Christophany. This Melchizedek, king of peace, king of righteousness, king of Salem, priest of the Most High God, is indeed a Christophany, an appearance of Jesus Christ before the birth in Bethlehem. Now, the only other time that we get any other information about Melchizedek is a prophetic utterance, one verse, in Psalm. And in Psalm 110, verse 4, "The Lord has sworn and will not relent. You are a priest forever, according to the order of Melchizedek." Why then we have a priestly order. So this prophetic utterance is calling for a change. It's a messianic psalm, meaning this is referring to the Messiah, the promised Messiah. Messiah hasn't come yet. But the order of Aaron and Levi has come. We already have a high priest. What do we need with another one? I hope we answer that question as we go through. Now in chapter 7, verse 1, "For this Melchizedek, king of Salem, priest of the Most High God, who met Abraham returning from the slaughter of the kings and blessed him, to whom also Abraham gave a tenth part of all first being translated king of righteousness, and then also king of Salem," meaning king of peace, "without father, without mother, without genealogy, having neither beginning of days nor end of life, but made like the Son of God, remains a priest continually." Verse 3 is what pushed me in the direction that this is, in my mind, you don't have to agree, but this is a pre-appearance of Jesus before the birth in Bethlehem. What those who say, no, that couldn't be it, it's a type, what they're saying is, the Bible just doesn't give us information about his genealogy. No, it doesn't. What it says is, he is without father, without mother, without genealogy, having neither beginning nor end of life, made to look like the Son of God, remains a priest forever, continually, forever. As I said before, he couldn't be a king and a priest. There were several that tried. God dealt with them severely. Kings who tried to act like a priest, make an offering, so forth. But we know that Jesus is King of Kings and Lord of Lords, right? And so the author of Hebrews is saying, and he is our great high priest, simultaneously king and priest, just like Melchizedek. King of righteousness. Listen to this. 1 John chapter 2, verse 1 says, my little children, these things I have written to you so that you may not sin. And if anyone sins, we have an advocate with the Father, Jesus Christ the righteous. King of righteousness. King of peace. Isaiah chapter 9, verse 6. You'll hear me read this one more time this morning. You'll remember this around Christmas time. For unto us a child is born, unto us a son is given. And the government will be upon his shoulders, and his name will be called Wonderful, Counselor, Mighty God, Everlasting Father, Prince of Peace. John 14, verse 27, peace I leave with you, my peace I give to you. Not as the world gives, do I give you. Let not your heart be troubled, neither let it be afraid. And that verse 3, without father, without mother, without genealogy, having neither beginning of days nor end of life. The argument that the author of the book of Hebrews is making is that as a Christian, you have Jesus. If you want to drift back into your old ways, Levitical system, you'll have a high priest after Aaron. You'll have a sacrificial system. But having Jesus is having everything. There are so many people who, even in our day and age, who try to have peace through all kinds of other means. But he is the King of peace. And so it's not Moses, it's not angels, it's not prophets, it's not high priest that you need. It's Jesus that you need. So don't drift back into your old ways of worship. Don't drift back into your old ways of living. So before Aaron, high priest Melchizedek. After Aaron, high priest Melchizedek in the order of Melchizedek. That the difference there is eternal. Having neither beginning of days nor end of life. The author of John, opens his gospel with these words. In the beginning was the Word. The Word was with God, and the Word was God. He was in the beginning with God. All things were made through him, and without him nothing was made that was made. In him was life, and the life was the light of men. Who's John referring to? Jesus. In the beginning was the Word. Amazing. Now, this isn't the beginning like when you read in Genesis, in the beginning God created. This is a beginning that stretches your imagination to eternity past. By the way, in the beginning, when God created Genesis 1:1, you have enough information to know that everything that you see and that you touch is comprised of atoms, right? And there's neutrons and morons and all kinds of things that are, I'm not very scientific. And it holds everything together. But there are these sub-electronic particles called quarks. that hold atoms together. Now, this was discovered in 1960s. And they're so tiny that they can't be observed, but the scientists all agree that they exist. And when they try to explain how they really work, it's a magnetic field, but it is similar to a sound wave. Okay, let's just rehearse this now a little bit with me. In the beginning, Genesis, God didn't mold everything together. The Bible kind of makes that like, you're the potter, I'm the clay, kind of a thing. We understand all that, but in the beginning, God did not mold everything together. He spoke. These quarks can only be described as a sound wave that holds together the atom, that holds together your body and the chair that you're sitting on right now. Amazing. God said, "Let there be light." God said, "Let's separate the waters from the firmament." God said, sound wave. And a quark holds together an atom, and all the atoms hold together your body and the chair you're sitting on, the pulpit I'm standing behind, the Bible you're holding in your hand. Because God said. All because, but we go back further. In the beginning of beginnings was the Word. The Word was with God, and the Word was God. Back to that verse I shared with you a little while ago from Isaiah. For unto us a child is born, unto us a son is given, and the government will be upon his shoulders. His name will be called Wonderful Counselor, Mighty God, Everlasting Father, Prince of Peace. Verse 7 says, of the increase of his government and peace there will be no end. Upon the throne of David and over his kingdom, to order it and establish it with judgment and justice from that time forward, even forever. Even forever. Levites, high priest, not one of them can be high priest forever. He had a beginning and he had an end. Why? Because he died. He had a beginning because he was born. He had an end because he died. But Melchizedek has no genealogy. He has no beginning nor end. We go way, 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 way back and stretch our imagination to eternity past, and what do we find? Jesus, the Word. And when we zip in the opposite direction, go to eternity in the future, what do we see? Jesus. Forever. Verse 4 of our text, take a look with me, please. Now consider how great this man was, to whom even the patriarch Abraham gave a tenth of the spoils. That's the whole point of this book. Consider how great. Consider how great Jesus is. Greater than the prophets, greater than the angels, greater than Moses, greater than the high priest. The author of Hebrews introduced us to this element, this direction that he's taking us into. Remember, in the last chapter, he's saying you become dull of hearing. He was saying you become stagnant in your walk with Jesus. You've stalled out. As a matter of fact, you're drifting back. So it's taken from chapter 2, verse 17 says, therefore, in all things, he, capital H, so Jesus, had to be made like his brethren, that he might be a merciful and high priest in things pertaining to God, to make propitiation for the sins of the people. Introduced us to that in chapter 2 and had to say, no, I got to shake you up a little bit before we really, get to chapter 7. Because you're dull of hearing, you're lazy, you're still on milk, you should be on meat. You remember all those analogies that we had. You should be teachers by now, but you need someone to teach you. Verse 5, and indeed those who are of the sons of Levi, who receive the priesthood, have a commandment to receive tithes from the people according to the law, that is, from their brethren, though they have come from the loins of Abraham. But he whose genealogy is not derived from them receives tithes from Abraham and blessed him who had the promises. Now, beyond all contradiction, the lesser is blessed by the better. Here the mortal men receive tithes, but there he received them of whom it is witness that he lives. Even Levi, who receives tithes, paid tithes through Abraham, so to speak. For he was still in the loins of his father when Melchizedek met him. And now that, so to speak, in verse 9. The author included it and said it that way because he's giving an allegory. He doesn't want that to be taken literally. So Abraham and Aaron are obviously in the same family tree. Abraham, the patriarch, set the precedence. The precedence was Melchizedek is better. From Abraham to Melchizedek goes the tithe. From Melchizedek to Abraham comes the blessing. By the way, when king, priest Melchizedek came out to minister to Abraham, he comes with wine and bread. That's significant all on its own. The same elements that Jesus used from a Passover meal to convert it into communion. Again, come tonight, partake of communion. You have a great high priest. His name is Jesus. Verse 11 says, therefore, if perfection were through the Levitical priesthood, for under it the people receive the law, what further need was there that another priest should rise according to the order of Melchizedek and not be called according to the order of Aaron? Why was there, the author is saying, a prophetical utterance concerning a different priesthood coming in the future, given to us in Psalm 110, verse 4? Again, the Lord has sworn and will not relent. You are a priest forever according to the order of Melchizedek. So if you could reach perfection through the Levitical system under the priesthood of Aaron, why in the world would God have said, no, I promise you this, there's going to be another priest under the priesthood of Melchizedek. I've said it. I'm not going to change my mind. I will not relent. Verse 12, for the priesthood being changed. God was changing the priesthood. Of necessity, there was also a change of the law. If perfection could come through the Levitical priesthood, there would be no need for another priest. So why is there a change? Because the law cannot save you. Why is there a change? Because Aaron, or any high priest, can save you. Only Jesus can save you. And he can save you right here, right now, today. Saved, we'll read, to the uttermost. Some of us should read it, saved to the guttermost. Because that's where he's brought us from. For he of whom these things are spoken belongs to another tribe from which no man has offered at the altar. We're going to see it in just a minute. Jesus was not a Levite. He came from the tribe of Judah. Nobody from Judah ever stood at the burnt altar. No one from Judah ever went behind the veil into the Holy of Holies. No one from Judah ever served as a priest of any kind, any dimension whatsoever. For it is evident that our Lord arose from Judah, of which tribe Moses spoke nothing concerning priesthood. And it is yet far more evident if in the likeness of Melchizedek there arises another priest who has come not according to the law of a fleshly commandment, but according to the power of an endless life. For he testifies, you are a priest forever according to the order of Melchizedek. Going back to that one utterance, prophetic utterance, saying this is going to happen. I said it, it'll happen. I am not going to change my mind. That's what God said. God would never introduce a new priesthood if it were not necessary. And he would never introduce an inferior priesthood. So the Jewish community, the Hebrew community, was saying, you're saying that Jesus is your high priest? No, he couldn't possibly be a high priest. Come on. Come on back home. Come back to Levitical worship. Go back to your old life. Couldn't happen. If he were a priest, it would be inferior. Just the opposite. God would never establish something inferior to what was already going on. It would always be better. The mere mention of the order of Melchizedek shows that God wanted the priesthood to be changed. Verse 18. For on the one hand, there is an annulling of the former commandment because of its weakness and unprofitableness. For the law made nothing perfect. And on the other hand, there is the bringing in of a better hope. Remember, we started out with a hope. Our hope is Jesus. It's an anchor through which that we draw near to God. So the Levitical system could never fully atone for sin. There was always atonement mentioned, but it could never arrive at that. All it could do was cover sin, a kofar. Like sweeping the sin under a rug. And another sacrifice and sweeping it under the rug until the rug is piled high with stuff that swept underneath it. Only Jesus can take away sin. Peter writes in his first epistle, chapter 1, he says, knowing that you were not redeemed with corruptible things like silver and gold from your aimless conduct received by tradition from your fathers. You were redeemed with, verse 19, but with the precious blood of Jesus as of a lamb without blemish and without spot. You couldn't be redeemed by the sacrifice year after year after year of a lamb. The nation couldn't be redeemed with the sacrifice of bulls. The high priest himself couldn't be redeemed with the sacrifice that he would offer on his own behalf. Verse 20, and inasmuch as he was not made priest without an oath, for they have become priests without an oath, but he with an oath by him who said to him, the Lord has sworn, and I will not relent. You are a priest forever, according to the order of Melchizedek. Repeating over and over and over again, the prophetical utterance that I gave to the psalmist is what I said, and I said what I meant, and I will not change. Because at the perfect time, the priesthood would change. Verse 22, for by so much more Jesus has become a surety, a guarantee, a surety of a better covenant. The new covenant is guaranteed. You understand there's a difference between a guarantee and a warranty, right? You get a car, you have a warranty, so many miles. You buy a product, you have a warranty, so many days. Versus forever. 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 Guaranteed forever. Also, there were many priests because they were prevented by death from continuing. But Jesus, he, because he continues forever, has an unchangeable priesthood. Therefore, he is also able to save to the uttermost those who come to God through him, since he always lives to make intercession for them. For such a high priest was fitting for us, who is holy, blameless, undefiled, separated from sinners, and has become higher than the heavens, who does not need daily, as those high priests, to offer up sacrifices, first for his own sins and then for the people's. For this he did once for all when he offered up himself. For the law appoints as high priests men who have weaknesses, but the word of the oath, which came after the law, appoints the Son who has been perfected forever. It was the high priest's job. It was his responsibility to represent God to the people and the people to God. And so he would come with the prophetic utterance, perhaps. He would come with a reading scripture. He would come before the people representing God. But at the same time, on his shoulders and on his breastplate, he wore certain stones that represented the tribes of Israel. And so when he would go into prayer before God with the weight of Israel on his shoulders, he would be making intercession. And that's what our high priest is doing for you today, right now, at this moment. Ever making intercession for you. He's making intercession for me. Saying, I hope Gary gets this right so the people will understand. He's making intercession for you. That you would understand. That you have everything as a Christian that you will ever need because you have Jesus. And that hope, that eternal hope, is an anchor. That anchor will keep you from drifting. Now unto him who is able to keep us from stumbling, from falling. Back to the end of verse 27. We'll be closing with this. When he offered up himself. This is totally unique. A priest may bring a sacrifice and offer it on the altar, but Jesus was both the priest and the sacrifice. He is the best sacrifice brought to God that the priest could ever bring. Spurgeon penned these words: when Jesus offered up himself, it was a willing offering. Oh, this makes the sacrifice of Christ so blessed and glorious. They dragged the bullocks and they drove the sheep to the altar. They bound the calves with cords, even cords to the altar's horn. But not so was it with Christ of God. None did compel him to die. He laid down his life voluntarily, for he had power to lay it down and to take it up again. That's Jesus, the high priest, with the ability not only to lay his life down to pay for the sins of the people, not only to raise his life up again in victorious triumph over both sin and death, but he has the ability and the desire to save you and your family and your friends and your friends' friends. He took upon himself the sins of the world.